Well, hello, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And this morning, I'm glad to get back together with Riley Waggaman, who I heard a rumor that was in Shanghai, China, but it was I who got shanghaied because it was a bit of poetic license on the part of our correspondent, and I suppose you're still in Moscow, Russia. However, I didn't know they
No,
had colorful walls in Moscow, Russia. So,
I'm in Georgia. I'm in
oh,
Tbilisi.
oh, you really are in Tbilisi, Georgia.
Yeah, I really am. Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Well,
multiple levels to this to my trickery, John.
oh no, and I fell for it too. And I was dutifully, like, I was, that red feeling like, oh no,
Uh,
you got me. But you really are in Tbilisi, Georgia.
I really am. Yeah.
All right. Is that close to Kosovo?
Uh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's in
Is
the
is
Caucasus. It's like near Armenia and
yeah.
the
I'm just thinking
Turkey
of the
and
Kosovo, um, that the republic that broke away from Georgia, right? Wasn't it?
no, that's you're thinking of Abkhazia,
Okay.
right?
All right. No. Oh, maybe Abkhazia is the one that broke away from Georgia. Okay.
Right, which was part of the 2008 war, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you're thinking of Abkhazia. Yeah.
Anyway, so how's life treating you? It looks like you have got some color in your life. I love that aqua green color behind you.
Yeah, very, very colorful. It's okay. It's okay. I came here. I came here for a few reasons. My Russian visa expired, so I need to leave, and I needed to get a new Russian visa. And it turns out that I can't get a Russian visa here. It's like impossible,
Oh,
and which is a little bit annoying. I mean, I came here for other reasons, so it's not a total waste. But now I'm trying to figure out what to do next, where to go. It's okay though. These things happen. It's life. I'm not gonna get too worried about it. You know.
well,
So
I guess you could be in Shanghai, China, stuck in a
it could be.
hotel.
I could be stuck in quarantine in Shanghai, China.
Yeah. Um, Edward Slavsquat is at Substack.com, and you can follow this story there or pick it up from the Twitter feed that I got it from this morning. And but you did spend a good bit of your essay there talking about the the absolute banning of COVID in China, and I think that's a topic worthy of some discussion. We of course see our media and are horrified at the things that we see happening in Shanghai, China. And who knows? I don't know whether these films are accurate, whether these are candid or not. But you see these little children getting shepherded into these vans with wearing these oversized white, you know,
Yeah.
hazmat
Yeah.
suits, and then you see people having their dogs and cats taken away from them, and almost killed in front of their eyes sometimes. And I don't know if I can believe these things or not. Are they just trying to get us mad at China so we'll go to war, or are the Chinese really so paranoid about coronavirus that they're killing people's pets? I mean, I don't even know where to start with this. What do you suggest? How do we get a
Well,
handle?
look. I mean, it's. I mean, first of all, I totally understand the where you're coming from perspective. I mean, honestly, a lot of stuff that we see coming out of China now feels almost too incredible to believe. And one always has to be, you know, you got to stay on your toes, just in case someone lies to you about being in Shanghai. No, but the point is that I totally get that perspective. I'm quite sympathetic to it. The reality though is that zero COVID is a real thing in China. Nobody disputes it. The Chinese Communist Party openly backs it. So does Xi Jinping, by the way. He openly, publicly supports these policies. And you can, if you're suspicious of what you see on Twitter, just read Chinese state media, which is very explicit about what they're doing. I mean, they don't. I mean, they won't go into the horrible details of it, but they don't lie about what's happening, which is essentially that this policy requires regular COVID testing. I'm talking about like with you typically within a 72-hour period. You need a special sort of health pass to basically use any kind of public or government service. Uh, we're talking about situations where the quarantine measures are so strict that people actually did have difficulty getting food because you had to order everything in, and these food companies were just overwhelmed, and you would get occasionally these government handouts. And I watched pretty closely as several foreigners who were on Twitter who were in Shanghai in the spring, and they would show what they would get in these sort of government packages, and it really ranged. I mean, sometimes they would get like sort of two sort of sketchy potatoes, and sometimes it was more elaborate. But I mean, it's not a good situation when you're reliant on government handouts to feed yourself when you're locked in a compound. And the reality is that you can go on internet forums that are frequented by expats who are in Shanghai. Now, I suppose maybe they're all lying, but I think that that's a little bit too paranoid. And they talk about all their problems that they have living in Shanghai, living in Beijing, living in other parts of China, where these restrictions are really, really quite severe. And the most recent restrictions, which I found quite extraordinary, is that the one thing that you could say in favor of the Chinese system, Chinese COVID system, was that they didn't have any real kind of compulsory vaccination. There were some regions who tried it, and then they were sort of, whacked on the, with the ruler by the centralized government. But starting on Monday, Beijing is going to require people to be vaccinated, have proof of vaccination to visit all sorts of public venues, and they're requiring all medical personnel to be vaccinated, and there's a whole list now, which is really quite extraordinary if you think about how far we are into this COVID situation, whatever you want to call it. And at this point, now, after everything China has done, they're mandating their vaccine in Beijing, which is shocking, truly. So what happens next? I don't know. I don't know.
That's an amazing account right there, because a lot of that, what you just said, is news to me. First of all, I think most of us that just kind of go with the general feeling of what really is going on would think that in China they had compulsory vaccination all along. Why wouldn't they have? I mean, they're the totalitarian nightmare state, so they would be the most active in making people submit to the jabs. But now you're telling me they haven't had that. Apparently, right at the beginning of it, they did have a lot of vaccination going on, but it seems to have just kind of drifted off their radar screen. At the same time, this is what's interesting, though. What does the Chinese government know about coronavirus that makes them so paranoid about even letting somebody, go to the store that might have a positive PCR test? Do they know something that we don't know, or has this just all been a kind of a make it up as you go psyop, which it seems to have been, from our perspective?
Yeah. Well, look, again, I think that's a really good and important question to ask, because the policies taken by the Chinese government are so extreme that one would hope that there's some sort of logic behind all this. There's some sort of, even if it's, very, very difficult to defend on certain levels, that there's some sort of logic behind it all. That being said, of course, obviously, just as a side note, I mean, many Western governments have taken very, very similar tyrannical, disgusting measures. So we shouldn't,
Oh, yes, including
we
ours.
shouldn't, yeah, exactly. So we shouldn't put, pretend that the Chinese are super, extraordinary in this sense. But what I would say to a question like this, because you do hear it a lot, is, my understanding, at least sort of in the circles where I operate, is that most people, including a lot of medical professionals, understand that PCR tests, and in fact, basically all COVID related tests, are not fit for purpose. That they're not designed to actually detect sickness. They can detect, they can detect if you zoom in enough on, the sample, you'll find little fragments of what is allegedly SARS-CoV-2. And this does not mean that you're sick. It just means that it's in your system, it's floating around. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that the inventor of the PCR test, who's Kerry Mullis, is that his name?
He's the one that says he invented it. We have to check with our experts on who actually invented it.
Okay,
There's
fair enough.
There's quite a lot of depth.
Is there a controversy with that? Okay, well, I won't go down that path then. But I do believe that it's generally, there is a lot of very serious people who argue that PCR test really is not, maybe it's one way
right
to detect possible sickness or possible disease, but you can't use a PCR test to say that someone is, a public health threat who should be, locked up. And what's interesting about China,
is that what China is using? They're still using the PCR?
They use PCR, and they also use the what is it called? The nucleic acid tests. But was that how you pronounce it? But I have to say though that I just don't. I'm not sure how what we can make of this.
Yeah.
What's interesting though about China is that they differentiate between asymptomatic and actual cases. So in order to be a diagnosed case in China, you have to have a positive test plus symptoms, which is not the case in most of the world. So
right.
China understands this difference. They recognize that the test alone is not enough. But one person, you get a positive test, or you're standing next to someone who has a positive test, and your health code goes green, you go to quarantine. They don't care. And the problem that I have with this idea that this elaborate system is about public health and public safety is that if you've seen the insides of the quarantine camps that they put people in, so these are people who had contact with someone who tested positive, or even in the same building as someone who tested positive. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can end up in one of these camps, including testing positive yourself. They send you to one completely unhygienic open room, like they convert these big conference centers into quarantine camps where you're lined up in rows with no actual like separating doors, a separating barrier. And it's like they don't even have showers in some of these places. How is this beneficial to public health? And this is not a conspiracy theory. There are videos online where you can watch people walk around with their video camera and show what life is like in one of these quarantine camps in Shanghai or Beijing or wherever. And so the question is, how does this benefit public health? Like, what is going on here? Like, how would this actually stop the spread of anything? Surely it would make much more sense just to isolate in your home. And I'm sure the Chinese have the technology and the means to make sure that people stay in their house. I guarantee that. So it's just very strange. I have to say that I don't want to make claims. I don't want to speculate too much, but I just find the theory that this is done for some sort of greater good it's hard for me to believe that, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. I'm really surprised that it's only now that they're forcing the doctors and medical professionals and all to submit to it, because we've had that from the beginning. That was the main theme, I think, was to make sure that to get all the first responders, as we call them, jabbed as soon as possible. And
yeah, my theory on that, John, is, and I could be wrong, but this is just my theory, is that I think that probably the situation was they put so much faith into lockdowns, like really, really strict lockdowns, that the idea here was that once we do these strict lockdowns, COVID is gone. We don't need the vaccination. It's an extra, layer of protection for anyone who wants it. We don't need to mandate. Like, by mandating the vaccines, you're almost implicitly stating that for some reason, the really, really strict lockdowns weren't enough, right? But now that allegedly COVID is back and they're locking everyone down again and they have all these restrictions, I guess they're saying, well, we'll just mandate the vaccines. I mean, maybe that's what's happening. I don't know.
And is their vaccine any different from the Moderna and AstraZeneca and stuff, if you know?
Nobody knows really. I mean, it's very even less transparency than in Russia, obviously. So it's very, very difficult to know exactly.
Hmm.
So,
Wow. Well, another of your recent articles, which I wanted to ask you about, is called Genetic Russia. And
hmm
I will go ahead and share that on the screen if I can make my mouse do this here. Just one second. Just so folks, you can see an example of the Substack that I enjoy reading and Riley enjoys writing, and sometimes so cleverly that he fools me. Well, enjoyed it anyway. Let's see. Uh, oops. Maybe I'm technically deficient this morning. We'll see. There we go. All right, here you go. Um, Genetic Russia, and this is where I wanted to ask you a big question, and that is is the Russian government racist? Is the genetic information important for determination of, which are favored or unfavored genetic traits as far as race is concerned? I'm I'm just concerned that they want such to be able to identify you by your DNA, and to the point that one of my themes in trying to study is are we looking at a real eugenics
Yeah.
program going on behind the
Yeah.
scenes that
Yeah.
perhaps all the big governments are already participating in. So um, that's where I think is my interest in this. So genetic Russia, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is a topic that has always fascinated me, and I've written sort of briefly about it before. But the reason I brought it up again was because I found a very intriguing news report from TASS, so Russian state media, from the end of June, and they were reporting on how some Russian medical institution had developed this genetically created antibody medicine for treating COVID, and that they would be able to use this sort of new genetic technological platform to quickly create therapies for future viral infections. And of course, this sounded pretty spooky to me, but it also didn't really surprise me because the reality is that the Russian government, like many governments around the world, have been pretty open about their interest in developing next generation genetic technologies. Um, one part of this, of course, is that even before COVID in 2019, as part of a sort of biosecurity decree, uh, Russian President Vladimir Putin called for the creation of uh, two things, basically some sort of genetic certification and of Russians, and also a sort of unified genetic database. So the genetic database, as far as I understand it, for now, is does not include the human genome, but is basically for documenting, uh, labeling all sort of organisms, plants, animals, that sort of thing. The genetic passport, as it's called, is allegedly supposed to be used for creating sort of preventative medicine systems, where this idea that if we know your genome, we can predict what diseases you might be vulnerable to, and we can give you the necessary treatment or like create custom treatments for you. Which, okay, on paper, I mean that sounds nice. I mean, who can argue with that? I don't doubt that probably that kind of technology could be used in these sort of ways. The problem, of course, is that like anything, I think it's very, very difficult to deny the fact that there's a huge possibility for a very, very serious slippery slope here. And just like with COVID, where it started out with 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and now we're here with COVID. It didn't take 2 weeks, and now COVID is being used for to justify the most extreme, you know, assaults on personal privacy and liberties, one has to recognize the potential for very, very extreme abuses here. In fact, I didn't include it in my article because I lost the link, which infuriated me. But there was a very interesting Russian newspaper article, maybe from 6 months ago, talking about how, yes, in theory, a system where the Russian government collects, knows your sort of genetic makeup could be used to exclude certain groups of people from certain employment opportunities, for example. And you could do this in a way that, the U.S. Marine Corps excludes people who don't have 20/20 vision, right? You can't be a pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could do it you can do it in a way where, well, this is because we need someone with a very specific genetic makeup to do certain things. But obviously, again, this opens up the door to just basically genetic classes, genetic discrimination, mandatory genetic therapies in order to make sure that you're not threatening other people with similar genetic problems or whatever. It's just one, you could go down the list. We could talk about this for hours and think of all the ways that such a system could be abused. And again, I'm not, even in the article I mentioned, there are other very similar systems of this already being developed in the United States and other countries, as I understand it. This is not exclusive to Russia, but we're basically entering a genetics arms race. Russia is very much part of it. They've been very open about it. And in fact, Health Minister Mikhail Murashko, in November 2021, when he met with Putin to talk about the great successes of Russia's, genetic technology development, cited Sputnik V as a great accomplishment of Russia's genetic, technology, which is quite depressing, I have to say. So anyway, it was just, it was just a way for me to say, guys, this genetic thing is real. It's in Russia. Not so good. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I want other people to reflect on that because for instance, my good friends at the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche organization are very, very much in favor of the BRICS, the
yeah,
the BRICS consortium that could possibly, especially if China and Russia got together, create an alternate financial system. And this is what I have been studying on a number of my shows lately. Is did this BRICS thing actually? Is it not just another creation of the Wall Street and London bankers that created? That is comes from like the old British East India Company. That those are the
right.
places where they had their where they made their money and got all the resources. Are the people running those countries now not
That's a
likely
great
to?
analogy. I didn't think of it like that. That's such a great way of putting it.
Well,
Yeah.
I owe that to David Underdown, by the way, who's a wonderful thinker. We had a great session with him last night, and I recommend everybody to listen to that after this, because David's insight is what got me there. It is the old British East India Company and the other companies like the Dutch. And are those governments now just another funnel for the old financial system? Who knows? But if we find ourselves and starting to really revile the United States, and people
Yeah.
around the world are there. I watch a lot of my friends in Ireland, for instance. But there's people all over the world that are just sick and tired of the United States bullying everybody, and it looks to me like the United States is being set up in a way to fall, but to fall in
Mm.
favor of what? To fall in favor of a new world of brotherly love and or is it another scam from the people behind the curtain that are just figured out another way to rape us and pillage us and take all our stuff and then sweep us off the side like dead Indians on the television screen, gone forever from history. I don't know, but what do you think about the BRICS, Edward Slavsquat?
I mean, I think you're asking some very provocative questions that should be asked. I have to say that sort of the sort of creation and structure and sort of inner dealings of BRICS is not my
Hmm.
specialty. My understanding, though, is that BRICS was at least partly the concept for it. My understanding was sort of developed by some sort of Goldman Sachs analyst, right? And possibly, I was talking to a friend the other day who said that even a World Economic Forum young global leader was involved in its creation or its conception. I gotta double check those, but I trust my friend is a pretty smart guy. I mean, I have to say that the problem is, regardless of who made it, why it was made, whatever, just look at what the BRICS are saying. So, for example, in I guess it must have been earlier mid-February, Russia and China came out with this joint statement saying that they were absolutely committed to the UN Sustainable Development sustainability goals, 2030 sustainability goals.
The
But they just went down the
SDGs.
list. They just went down the list like if it was, you know, like Trudeau or Biden or anyone making an agreement. I mean, they talked about, we're committed to stopping coronavirus and developing vaccines and like climate change, prevention, and just a whole list of scams. And why do that? why why issue such a statement? And it's the problem too is I'm sorry to say, I hate to be the guy to point it out, but I think that the conflict in Ukraine has created a situation where there really is several ultimatums for the Russian state. And one of them has to be that you are no longer going to participate in Western scams. Because if you do, that has to be indicative of something bad. Because why do it? Why at this point, if you're playing along, why play along anymore? If you're really in this existential crisis for your own survival as a people, why continue to do this to yourself? Why continue? And it's not just issuing press releases. I mean, you're doing harm to your own population by continuing to go along with the COVID scam. And Russia has not done a U-turn in any meaningful way. In fact, it has gone in the opposite direction. Russia's health minister has openly stated that they are pursuing making the COVID vaccine mandatory under federal law. They're going to add it to the national vaccine schedule, which won't mean that every single Russian has to get vaccinated, but a lot will. A lot will. And it'll be a federal law, not just a regional decree. I mean, I could go down the list, even with ESG. They're still talking about ESG.
What's that?
It's environmental, social, and government. It's like this. It's basically like this term used by these sort of corporate, sustainability scam artists.
Sounds
This
like a
idea like,
storehouse.
yeah. So it's like this big thing, where we're committed to cutting down on our, carbon footprint and blah blah blah. In a country like Russia, under the current circumstances, shocking. It's truly shocking. And I've written about this several times. In June, there's something called the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is basically like Russia's Davos. And who came to this conference? First of all, Dr. Tedros phoned in from via video link. They had the former health minister of Israel there, who is a huge Pfizer shill. They had all of these maniacs sitting on a panel talking about how we need to think of new ways to convince Russians that next generation genetic vaccines are safe and effective. They're saying it openly, and there's just no way to get around that. And again, I don't want to be the guy who's like, trying to poop on everyone. I'm just pointing out what the Russian state is saying. And we're not talking about little, regional authorities, the highest levels of government. Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy secretary of the Security Council, recently stated he was on some conference panel. Recently stated that we can't ignore the COVID pandemic. He said this like a week and a half ago. He was like, we got to take more, we got to be super careful because COVID is still out there, and we can't give up on all of these, measures and things that we've developed, over the last 2 years. Now, to add to that, Russia has officially dropped its mask mandate, so which was being ignored for years anyway. But the government is still pushing the vax so hard here. It's clear that they want to keep injecting Russians. And nobody wants it. Nobody needs it. It's not safe. It's not effective. Why are they doing it?
Uh-oh,
I don't know.
you just got me another strike, Riley.
Oh
My,
no, this is going on YouTube.
yeah, we're on
I'm
YouTube.
so sorry.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Well, at least they didn't shut me down right in the
out.
middle of the show. But we were just kidding, folks. That was just
You're kidding.
joke.
That was another Shanghai joke.
Shanghai.
That was another Shanghai joke.
Oops,
Yeah.
I got fooled again. Yeah, of course we love our vaxes, all of us.
We love our vaccines.
I know. I think I'll go get another one. Right. I'll be right back.
Me too. Booster.
Yeah, I'm a booster myself.
Booster man. Yeah.
Oh God, you just have to laugh. What else can you do? You have to laugh.
You have to laugh.
It's insane. But yeah, I mean, what you're telling me is not good news, because I love to think that there was a savior out there on a white horse, even if he's got his shirt off and riding a bear. I want that savior to come along and rid us of the Biden monster and the Pelosi demons.
Me too, guys. Me too. Honestly, me too. Nothing would make me happier to see Putin put handcuffs on a great many prominent Russians whose names I won't mention because I still haven't gotten my Russian visa. But like, it's just you just gotta call it like you see it, And unfortunately, I'm just not seeing a lot.
Your courage in doing this is really remarkable, and I love the casual conversations we have about things that some people do end up in those gulag-like conditions, and we worry about you a little bit. I think it's
no, don't worry.
Okay. Right, I won't, but
that touches me. It does, but don't worry about me. No, I'll be okay.
Well, you're looking good.
It's my ridiculous my goofiness that keeps me safe, because no one would put someone named Edward Slavsquat in a gulag. They would just look silly.
And nobody would believe that you're in Shanghai, China.
Exactly. No one would believe that.
Nobody. Nobody would be that dumb.
No.
How much is the Belt and Road an issue with Russia or you? Is that anything you ever think about? Is it a common topic? Where does it fall on the scale of topics?
Again, it's by no means something that I am deeply educated in.
Yeah.
Look, I if someone wants to say, let's bomb people less and build more roads, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea, in theory, Belt and Road sounds really cool to me. I like the, at least the purported idea behind it, which is the countries of the world should, treat each other as equals. We should trade more freely with each other. We should have greater communication and interconnectivity with one another. That's great. That sounds like a world that I can sign up for. Is this world going to include vax passes to get across a border? Is it going to include getting a Q-tip shoved up your nose in order to, use the highway? I don't know. It's unfortunately the devil's in the details, right? And who knows? But in theory, it sounds cool. I'm not, I'm listening.
This, but I take it from your answer that it's not something the Russian government is talking about or actively promoting.
You know what? I again, it's not again. I can't pretend that I'm an expert on it, but
Sure.
it's not something that I see super regularly in Russian media. That's not to say it's not there, but I feel like it's more of something that's more in sort of uh, you know, southern hemisphere
Hmm.
below. But my understanding though is that Russia's on board with it. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So
Yeah. And another topic that we were talking about last night with David is the relationship of Germany and Russia, and particularly the the very interesting fact that Gerhard Schroeder was the chancellor of Germany, or the prime, whatever you call it, the prime minister, I guess, or do they call it the president? I'm sorry, I'm confused. But whoever, he was the head of the German government before Merkel, and now he is like the principal face of Rosneft and the uh, the pipeline. The pipeline through the Baltic Sea. What's the name of that pipeline? And What 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 can you tell me about Gerhard Schroeder's role, and is he an ally of Putin? Is that something you have any um, anything to add on?
my understanding is that Schroeder has been a long time. I mean, he's been very much a long time sort of cheerleader for closer economic and I guess political ties between Germany and Russia, and he's been seen as sort of a voice of reason in Germany among so much, Russia hysteria over the past years. That being said, my if I remember correctly, I should look it up right now. I think that he was on the board of Gazprom and was
Yes.
recently
Yeah.
lost his seat. Is that correct? Lost seat Gazprom. Let me see.
Yeah, I don't know enough to actually ask the question well. I just was wondering if it was a topic that was on your radar
Oh,
screen.
okay. He wasn't. I think he was on. Maybe he was. He was offered a seat on Gazprom, but I guess didn't take it. But he was on. Um, he was a chairman of Rosneft. Wow, which is a big
Russia.
Russian state conglomerate. Okay,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I guess the sort of the scandal behind Schroeder, if you want to put it that way, is that he has been pretty close with the Russian government for a very long time. He, I think, rightfully so, has called for closer ties, productive, cooperative ties between Germany and Russia. But he's also, on the chair of Rosneft and probably profits from closer cooperation. But it just goes with the territory, I guess. But yeah, interesting guy, undoubtedly. And of course, at this point, I mean, with all the Nord Stream, drama, I mean, what happens now between Germany and Russia? And obviously, this has been a topic that you could trace back decades, right? This idea that uh, there's been this sort of plot to prevent Germany and Russia from having cooperative relations. Yeah, that this would be sort of the worst case scenario for certain powers that be, and perhaps that's true. I don't know.
A certain sceptered realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this England, England, Britons never will be slaves, but
Exactly.
everybody else is going to be, yeah, the British system, and yeah, the Mackinder plan, and making sure that there's never a connection between Europe and Russia and China, so that the British can keep on making their money through their British imperial banking system. And
Yeah.
and Americans, are apparently the world thinks that it's American. The U.S. is the devil, but it's the banks behind, that are paying the military industrial complex that are really the devil, and that goes back a long, long time. The really, really old money. Well, that's my opinion. In Tbilisi, Georgia, and I remember now the Kosovo was from Albania and not Georgia, so
Mhm.
that was my confusion. Sorry. Um, in Tbilisi, Georgia, is it comfortable now? Is it a nice place to be sitting there?
I can't complain. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a very sort of it's very, very different from Moscow. It's very, very mellow, pretty laid back. A lot of people just sitting outside drinking wine. Um, the weather is a little bit can be quite, uh, you know, challenging. And I live like on the top of this hill that takes me very painful to. So every morning I have to go. I go down the hill, which is fine, but then I have to go back up the hill at some point, and that's less fun. But I'm getting used to it, and yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting place to be right now because Tbilisi has this sort of social schizophrenia where it's totally reliant on Russian tourism, but it has like Ukrainian flags everywhere, and even like this sort of very hateful graffiti you see sometimes, like Russians go home and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But this city would just like cease to exist without Russian rubles, basically. So it's really strange to be here because in a way I feel so um, the problems of the world I could easily ignore very very easily, but somehow it's still quite close to me, and you know creates strange feelings of closeness and distance from the conflicts of the world. So yeah, strange times.
You've escaped in a way, but then you see around you all the reminders that you haven't really escaped. You just
Exactly. You can't escape your problems. That's lesson number one when you live abroad. Never escape.
well, yeah, vacations are nice, but, being an expat or something, that's a challenge, and I don't think I could handle it at this point, but I would love to do more traveling. I've never really done much, and I think you did that exactly the right thing as a young man to just get out and go somewhere and, see some new stuff and have some adventures, and, what's your favorite adventure from your travels earlier in your career?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. Um, I would say probably the most sort of the freest I've ever felt, maybe is a good way to put it, was when I first came to Russia. I was living in Bashkortostan, which is this republic that's sort of southern. It's near Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. It's not quite the Urals, but close. Not quite Siberia, but close. And I befriended this gentleman who was an ethnic Tatar, and Tatarstan is a republic that's next to Bashkortostan. And he was like, "Let me take you to my dacha, like my my country home in Tatarstan." Like, all right, that sounds awesome. So one weekend we drove out, took a few hours, just in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Just I don't know how to even describe it, but just sort of in every direction, nothing, absolutely nothing. And we get to this nice cabin, and I walk in, and his dad is sitting there, and he doesn't. So his dad is an ethnic Tatar too, and just starts jabbering away at me in Tatar. They have their own language, and is like absolutely insistent that I drink vodka with him. Like
Uh,
will not let me drink vodka with him. And we're
uh,
sitting around this table, and there's all these, sort of very curious looking Tatar dishes and various vessels filled with things, and you know. So we're drinking, and he's like, and Tatar is like, wait, you stay here. He comes back and he brings me like a little Tatar hat, like a traditional Tatar hat, and puts it on my head. And then he says something that I, obviously don't understand at all. And I turn to my friend Bulat, my Tatar friend, and I'm like, what is he saying? He's like, oh, like he wants to go to Banya with you. Like you should go to Banya together. So Banya is like Russian sauna. They have their own sauna. So I've just met this guy. We've known each other for like 10 minutes, and we're butt naked in this sauna drinking vodka, and he's just jabbering away in Tatar. I have no idea what he's saying, but just so happy to see me. Just, I guess, telling me all of the Tatar stories. And then, after we, and then we go out. It was a nice sauna. It was one that had like a pool outside. So we did the sauna. We ran outside and jumped in the cold water. And it was just, and it was like, I was like, where am I? Like, what is going on in my life? Like, how did this happen? And you just feel this incredible feeling of like everything I know and understand has left me. I'm just sort of with this guy that I don't understand, but is really nice to me, and I'm just living, and I'm naked with him for some reason. Yeah, it was great. It was really special.
Oh, I'm glad I asked. Yeah, there was a spate of things about something called Tartaria a couple of months ago going around the internet. I don't know if you saw any of that, but how it's just this ancient civilization that somehow got crushed and disappeared from the history and all of this stuff. I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
that's what
interesting.
he was probably telling you the entire history of Tartaria.
Probably.
Oh, well, that's fun. Yeah, that if you're locked up in your house, or if you're locked up in a hotel and you have to order out food and stuff like that, the chances of your having that kind of serendipitous joy are very
Yeah.
much just decreased. And without that kind of joy in our lives, it can be depressing. And you, you know, I was watching yesterday a video. It just caught my eye. A young woman talking about her experience. She's a Russian woman, young woman, girl. She went to the United States for 2 years and spent 2 years at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And she went back to Russia and did this. She talked about, what's the difference. And the main subject that she kept talking about was that in Russia people don't smile. If you
Mm.
walking down the street and you pass somebody, even if you catch their eye, they're not going to smile at you. Whereas in America, as it's at least in Minnesota, they smile at you. And I don't know about Washington D.C., but the general idea is that it's probably more depressing to live in a Russian economy where it's very difficult to do anything. And I'm speculating, but it seemed to me from the background around her that it's fairly desolate in most places, and uh, not conducive to happiness. This is what we declared our independence for, was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you feel like people in Russia are as that young lady described, generally trudging along, dealing with it, but not particularly happy or excited about life?
There's definitely some truth to it. I mean, it's a common stereotype, and usually most stereotypes have a little bit of truth to them. I would say that there's like two elements to that, though. I mean, first of all, um, I do feel that to a certain extent, a lot of the sort of, at least visible happiness that you see in America might be a little bit superficial. That there's sort of this expectation that if you're not happy and perky, there's something wrong with you and you need some antidepressants, right, or something like this. On the
Absolutely.
other end, on the other end of it, some of it, yeah, not all of it, of course. I mean, Americans are lovely people. On the other end of this, I do think that Russians can be they're much more reserved with strangers, and they're not going to sort of bubble over for you the first time they meet you. But once you get to know them, they're like best friends forever, the most loyal people you could possibly know. And I do think that I mean, look, it's an objective truth is that a lot of regions of Russia are economically depressed. There's not a lot of opportunities. I mean, there's a huge parts of Russia where if you're not in the oil industry, basically you're living in poverty. I mean, that's basically just the reality. And with the oil industry, this is not free money. You go and you work in Siberia on 1 month shifts in appalling conditions, and then you come back and you rest for a few weeks, then you go back out to the oil fields.
Mm.
It's not pretty. And it's a really tough life, and not surprisingly, I mean, it leads to all sorts of socioeconomic problems, and it's a problem, and that's just the reality. But I would say, though, having lived in parts of Russia that a lot of foreigners don't reach, um, there's still a very it's amazing. There's still people are hugely dignified. They love, for example, they love their flowers. They keep perfectly well kept gardens. They love music. They send their children to dancing and music lessons after school. These are people who, many of them, really have an understanding. They might not have a lot of money, but they really have understanding for what gives life meaning. What gives life beauty. And it's very inspiring, because I do feel like, especially Americans, maybe don't quite appreciate the opportunities that they're given, and they don't really take advantage of. And Russians, many of them, uh, I think, are, they're eager for that. They're eager for that chance to make something more of their lives. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixture, of course, and but I do cherish the idea that there's joy to be had, and that it's necessary that we have this happiness, that we have to have our moments of going out to the country to get into the banya with the tartar and drink vodka, or something equally surprising, and it takes you away from yourself. It takes you
Yeah.
out of your life, and but you're still there. And so
Yeah.
it's like, hey, well, it's still me, but everything else is different. Wow, that's amazing, and it's a wonderful feeling. I've had that feeling myself, although I don't think I've ever been to Tartar banyas. Oh well, I'm going to let you go. It's always a pleasure. We have not talked about the war in Ukraine, and that's kind of been important to me to not talk about it once in a while. I think about it a lot. I wish it was over. From my point of view, nobody should be shooting at anybody, and we
Yeah.
just gotta uh, do the best we can to convince our governments and our leaders to make them stop, make it stop.
I fully agree. I fully agree with that. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and appreciate it again. Riley, don't forget to check out his Substack, Edward Slavsquat at substack.com. Thanks, everyone.